Welcome to Georgia Highlands College Math 97 and Math 99 video tutorials. In this video segment, we'll be answering the question, how do you factor a sum of cubes? Well, first of all, a sum of cubes is a binomial in the form of some term cubed plus some term cubed. The first step in this process is to actually identify that it fits into this mold of being a sum of cubes. So you should try to rewrite your binomial as a monomial cubed plus a monomial cubed. The second step in this process is to set up your parentheses for your factored form. Now when we do so, we should remember to always use SOAP. I know that sounds a little crazy, but obviously SOAP stands for something, and it stands for same, opposite, always positive, which still might be a little bit confusing. Well, SOAP is talking about the signs that you place inside your parentheses. So, since the sign that we begin with is a plus sign, the same would be another plus sign, and that goes in the first set of parentheses. The second set of parentheses starts with an opposite sign, so subtraction, and then the last sign is always positive. So we've set up our factored parentheses here. Now, the pattern that this follows when you factor the sum of cubes is there are singles of the monomials A and B out front. So it would simply just be A and B. Then the second statement here says square ends. So you'd want to square A at one end of the second set of parentheses and square B at the other end of the second set of parentheses. And then our final directive in setting up our factored form is that singles are in the center. So it's just the product of A and B in the center of the second set of parentheses. You simplify after you put things into place, and then you end up checking your product with multiplication to see if you start out with the same or end up with the same binomial that you started out with. Let's take a look at an example. Here you can see we have the example of x cubed plus 27. And the first step in our process is just to check and see if this actually fits the mold of being a sum of cubes. So I want to see if I can write this same binomial in the form of something cubed plus something cubed. Well, it's pretty clear to see that for that first term x cubed, we would simply have to cube x to make that term. And the second term, 27, we would have to cube 3. So since we can fit x cubed plus 27 into the mold of something cubed plus something cubed, this satisfies the requirements for being a sum of cubes. Now we're ready to start the actual factoring process. So we begin by just giving ourselves parentheses to land in for our factored form. So now we use SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. All right, we're ready to place singles out front. So I have x here and 3 here. Now we have square ends. So x squared out front and 3 squared on the end. Please notice that I plugged these into parentheses before I square them. You may have a situation where you have multiple factors within that term that need to be squared. And so using parentheses when you plug into these positions helps you see what all gets squared in the end. And finally, we have singles in the center. So it's just the product of A and B, which in our case here is X and 3. So we have this thing in its factored form now. All we have to do is simplify it and clean it up a little bit. Well, nothing changes about our first set of parentheses here. It's still X plus 3. There's no more simplification to do. However, a little bit can be done in the second set of parentheses. X squared gives us X squared. Negative X times 3 gives the term negative 3X. And 3 squared gives us plus 9. And this is the factored form of the binomial, which is a sum of cubes, x cubed plus 27. But we should check this before we make that statement. So I'm just going to check that when I multiply these factors with each other, that I end up with that same binomial that I began with. And I do this with distribution. So I distribute each term in the first polynomial to each term in the second polynomial. All right, so x times x squared gives x cubed. X times negative 3x is negative 3x squared. X times 9 is positive 9x. Coming back, I'm going to distribute my 3 now. 3 times x squared is positive 3x squared. 3 times negative 3x is negative 9x. And 3 times 9 is positive 27. When you simplify this, you come back and combine your like terms. However, when you do so, we notice that we have two pairs of opposite terms. A negative 3x squared and a positive 3x squared combine to make 0. And positive 9x and negative 9x also combine to make 0. So in the end, after all like terms are combined, we end up with x cubed plus 27. And if you notice, we can verify, sure enough, we end up with the same binomial that we started out with. Therefore, we can safely say that x plus 3 times x squared minus 3x plus 9 is the factored form of the sum of cubes, x cubed plus 27. I hope that this has been helpful for you in understanding how to factor a sum of cubes. If you have any other questions regarding this topic, please contact your Highlands instructor. Thank you.